Every Australian child grows up knowing that the ocean is free, the doctor is covered, and the weekend actually ends before Monday starts. None of this feels remarkable to them. It is simply the world. It is only when an American arrives and encounters these things for the first time as an adult that the Australian realizes what they have been living inside. Here is what I want you to answer before 15 seconds is up. Australians, what is the one thing you grew up with that you only realized was unusual when you explained it to an American? Americans, what is the one Australian thing you heard about and genuinely did not believe was real? Name it now, because today we go through 8 things Australians grow up with that Americans have never seen. Every Australian school holds a swimming carnival, not as an optional activity, not as a reward for the sporty kids, as a mandatory annual event where the entire school competes in swimming races in a public pool, and the day is treated as seriously as any academic assessment. Every student participates. Every house team competes. The child who cannot swim well still shows up, still participates in what they can, still stands in the sun with their house color ribbon and cheers for their teammates. The swimming carnival is not really about swimming. It is about the specific social infrastructure Australia built around outdoor physical activity as a shared experience for every child regardless of ability. The school that holds a swimming carnival is saying something about what it values, that physical confidence in the water is worth developing, that the ocean and the pool are part of Australian life for everyone, and that the child who grows up participating in this annually arrives at adulthood with a relationship with water that is different from a child who did not. Americans who hear about the school swimming carnival for the first time react in 2 ways. Some find it delightful. The image of an entire school descending on a public pool for a day of competition and community is genuinely appealing. Others find it anxiety-inducing, the mandatory nature, the public performance, the unavoidability of it. Both reactions reveal something real about what each culture expects childhood to feel like. In Australia, democracy smells like a sausage sizzle. On federal election day outside almost every polling station in the country, volunteers from local community groups, schools, sports clubs, church groups, run a barbecue selling sausages and bread for a few dollars, with proceeds going to the community organization. It is called the democracy sausage, and it has become one of the most distinctly Australian electoral traditions in the world. There is a website that maps every sausage sizzle location in the country on election day. The democracy sausage is not officially part of the electoral process. It arrived organically and stayed because it reflects something specific about how Australians relate to civic participation. As a communal activity with a social dimension, not a solemn individual duty conducted in silence. You show up because you must. You stay for a sausage because it is there and it costs $2 and the money goes to the school fundraiser, and the whole thing is pleasantly, specifically, unmistakably Australian. Americans hearing about the democracy sausage for the first time invariably want to know why America does not have one. The answer is complicated. America does not have compulsory voting, so there is less of a captive audience. American polling stations are less standardized. The civic community infrastructure that produces the sausage sizzle volunteer, the school P&C, the local football club, the church fete, operates differently. But the deeper answer is that Australian civic participation was designed to feel like belonging to something. The sausage is the design. Here is what the picture of Australian childhood and daily life consistently omits and must be said directly. The Australian childhood described in this video, the swimming carnival, the democracy sausage, the free beach, the bulk-billed doctor, is the childhood of a child who grows up in a major coastal city with a family that is stable, housed, and connected to the community institutions that produce these experiences. It is not the childhood of every Australian. Indigenous Australian children in remote communities grow up in circumstances that are so different from the coastal city picture that describing them as part of the same country requires an honesty that the positive narrative resists. The gap in health outcomes, educational outcomes, housing quality, and life expectancy between Indigenous and non-Indigenous Australians is not a footnote. It is a central failure that sits at the heart of every honest account of what Australia has built and for whom it built it. The child growing up in poverty in Western Sydney, or in regional Queensland, or in a remote community in the Northern Territory is not growing up inside the same Australia that the swimming carnival and the democracy sausage represent. The Australia that Australians are proud of, and the Australia that exists for every Australian are not the same country yet. And the distance between them is the most important thing Australia has not yet fixed. That is the honest tension. The Australian childhood described in this video does not reach every Australian equally. Subscribe before we continue. Drop your answer to the opening question in the comments now. In Australia, the hardware store Bunnings Warehouse is not just a place to buy timber and paint. It is a community institution with a sausage sizzle outside it on weekends run by local sports clubs and school groups. The Bunnings snag, a sausage and white bread with onions and sauce, has become so culturally embedded that when Bunnings briefly moved the onions under the sausage instead of on top of it in 2019 for safety reasons, it generated national media coverage and genuine public debate. The Bunnings sausage sizzle raises approximately $100 million per year for Australian community organisations. The school that needs new equipment, the football club that needs new uniforms, the surf life-saving club that needs new gear. These organizations raise significant portions of their annual budgets from the Bunnings snag on Saturday mornings. Americans hearing about this for the first time have two reactions. The first is amusement at the idea that a hardware store became a civic institution. The second is a more complicated recognition that America does not have an equivalent. Not because Americans are less community-minded, but because the specific infrastructure of Australian community life, the P&C, the footy club, the surf life-saving club, produces a volunteer ecosystem that the American equivalent of civic participation does not consistently generate in the same way. The Bunnings snag is not just a sausage. It is evidence of a community infrastructure that still works. Australian school canteens sell hot-cooked food to students at lunchtime, not vending machines, not cold sandwiches in a paper bag. A canteen run by parent volunteers or a contracted operator that sells meat pies, sausage rolls, sandwiches, hot chips, and fruit. The child who forgot their lunch, or whose parent did not pack one, goes to the canteen and buys something hot for a few dollars. The canteen is a feature of almost every Australian government primary and secondary school. In America, the school cafeteria exists, but it sits in a different cultural context. School lunch in America has become a policy battleground. The debate about free school meals, about lunch debt where students whose accounts have insufficient funds are denied a hot meal or given a cold sandwich as a marker of poverty, about the quality of cafeteria food and what it signals about how the system values the children inside it. The Australian school canteen is not politically contentious. It is simply there. The parent volunteers who run it are simply doing what school parents do. The child who buys a meat pie at recess is simply having recess. The absence of a moral or political framework around whether a child deserves a hot lunch is itself a cultural statement. Australia decided that feeding children at school was unremarkable infrastructure, not a contested policy position. 8 things. The swimming carnival that puts every child in the water annually. The democracy sausage that makes voting smell like community. The public beach that belongs to everyone by law. The school canteen that feeds children without political debate. The Bunnings snag that funds the football club. The GP visit that asks only what is wrong. The afternoon that ends when it ends. The weekend that is complete. None of these are dramatic. None of them make international news. None of them are the things that get written about when people write about Australia. They are the background, the texture, the specific quality of ordinary life that Australians absorbed so early and so completely that they stopped being able to see it. It is only when the American arrives, at the swimming carnival as a parent of a new Australian student, at the polling station on their first Australian election day, at the Bunnings on a Saturday morning, and reacts with genuine surprise that the Australian standing next to them understands what they have been living inside. Not a perfect country, a country that got some specific and important things right about what ordinary life should feel like, and built those things so deeply into the daily experience of growing up here that the children who grew up inside them carry them into adulthood as the invisible standard for what ordinary should be. That standard travels. The Australian who lives overseas carries it. The American who moves here acquires it. And the gap between that standard and what most of the world offers is what this channel has been documenting every week. Australia has not built this equally for every Australian. Say that directly before this ends. The swimming carnival does not happen in the school that cannot afford a pool booking. The democracy sausage is not at the polling station in the remote community where the nearest polling place is an hour's drive away. The school canteen, run by parent volunteers, requires parents who have time to volunteer, a resource that is not evenly distributed across every Australian school community. The public beach is accessible to everyone in theory, and to the people who live near it in practice. The Australia that Australians are proud of is real. It is also concentrated. It is strongest in the coastal cities, in the stable communities, In the schools that have the resources to run the things that make Australian childhood feel like the childhood described in this video. The distance between the Australia that works and the Australia that is still being built for everyone equally is the most important political question this country faces. It is also the question the country has been slowest to answer honestly. But the swimming carnival still happens. The democracy sausage is still outside the polling station. The beach still belongs to everyone. These things exist. Beach belongs to everyone. These things exist. They are imperfect and unequal in distribution, and they are still more than most countries built for their ordinary people on their ordinary days. Australians, which of these 8 did you grow up with and only realized was unusual when you left or explained it to someone from elsewhere? Americans, which one do you most wish you had grown up with? Pick one specific thing. Name it below.